share, recipe share. Share a little recipe with Recipe Share. Recipe Share, Recipe Share. Share a little recipe with Recipe Share.
Hi, thank you for joining us for this episode of Recipe Share, a program on AADL TV, where we spend a few minutes to talk about recipes in a featured category. Today's category is no-bake desserts. I'm Beth, and I'm joined by Katie and Elizabeth and a special friend and guest, Shoshana. So I'm going to put it off to Elizabeth and find out what you did for your no-bake desserts this week.
Thanks, Beth. So I did a very classic, simple childhood favorite of mine, no-bake cookies. I know it's boring, but I grew up loving them. My mom never made them, so it was like super exciting when I would go to a friend's house and they would have them. Once I even came home from a friend's house and told my mom, I wish I had a different mom that made no-bake cookies. That didn't change anything. She still never made them. But these are really fun and easy to make. And basically, I got the quote unquote recipe from the Food Network, but you barely need a recipe. You basically just bring sugar, milk, butter, and cocoa powder to a boil in a small saucepan, stir it a little bit, let it boil for a minute or two, take it off the heat, and then add in oats, creamy peanut butter, some vanilla, and a little bit of salt. Stir it up really well, and then drop tablespoons of this onto a baking sheet or a piece of parchment paper and let it sit until they solidify. I put them in the fridge to speed up that process. I also think they're a little better when they're kind of chilled, but they're super yummy. They are not at all good for you, but I just think they're great. The combination of the chocolate, the peanut butter, and a little bit of vanilla and salt is like so good. I remembered why I don't make them too often because I can't stop eating them. And they're just, it even said in the recipe, like, this is a childhood favorite. And I was like, yes, it is. So I made those. They were great. And I'm sure you can all envision them. They have a bunch of different recipes online, but I did think that the Food Network one was super easy to follow and had like 385 five-star reviews. So that's the one that I double checked to make sure I was doing everything right. And that's what I made. It was great. And I'll probably do it again in the future when I'm ready to eat them all in one day again.
Oh, I remember those cookies from when I was a kid for sure. And I've thought about them as an adult, especially when thinking about no-bake desserts. And it's like that fleeting thought, right? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, those cookies. So I'm super glad that you brought us a recipe. I'll definitely try it.
Yeah, I have tried to make them and they're actually really easy to get wrong because they won't, so every time I shouldn't say that, a third of the time I've done it, they don't solidify, possibly because I'm using too big of oats, but you end up with just a gooey mess. It's a tasty gooey mess, but no, those are possibly some of my favorite cookies as well.
Yeah, they're definitely mine. Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, besides me making them when I was a kid, when my kids started making them all the time, it was, and I think that's at some point we weren't putting peanut butter in, but I love peanut butter and chocolate. So yeah, I think that's going to have to be something to make, but I tend to eat a lot of them before they get made into cookies.
Well, and that's what I was going to say too, is there's no eggs. So even if it doesn't turn out like perfectly, you can just kind of eat the whole situation. Also, the Food Network mentioned that you could use almond milk if you are dairy free. I don't know if that would work. It seemed like almond milk would be pretty thin. But they said that it would work. So I was interested in that for our vegan friends, because I believe everything else would be vegan in it. So a thought, if you are vegan, you could give it a try. So that was mine. And I will hand it over to Shoshana to share with us what she made.
Well, speaking of vegan recipes, I actually, so the dessert that this was like if I had a babysitter or it was like a special evening kind of things when I was growing up, it was chocolate pudding. And we totally did the shake pudding. But I've always wanted to create a dessert soup. And I realized that if you make stovetop pudding, it's warm. It's actually kind of delicious, I think, if it's not cold. But if you truly want to do cold, there's a vegan recipe that I love. And I was going to say you could almost make it camping, but you do need a food processor. And so it's avocados, coconut milk, brown sugar, cocoa, and then a little bit of cinnamon and a little bit of vanilla. And you blend up the avocado and you add in the cocoa powder. What's funny is then it looks like it's done. And if you taste it, it's not. And you realize you need the sugar. But it's nice because it's really thick and you can control the consistency. So it's almost like mousse, but depending on the ripeness of your avocados and if you add in the coconut milk, at differing amounts, you can kind of have different thicknesses. I will say one thing that I noticed is that the vanilla is alcohol. And so if you have people who are avoiding all alcohol, it's not a bad idea to leave it out. But because it's not cooking, it's a little bit stronger of a vanilla sort of alcohol flavor. But the cinnamon was the surprise touch to me. It was like, oh, right. Like, I don't really think of cinnamon and chocolate being a thing together, but it was pretty good. So I definitely recommend it. And while you're eating a very large portion, you're like, I'm just eating an avocado. It's fine.
That sounds really good too. How many avocados do you use?
2 large avocados. You get a good amount of pudding off of that. So, yeah, I mean, I've made it with less. It is one of those things that because you're not working with too much science, if you have 3 small avocados or 2 small, you can vary it. And the trick is to put it in a food processor and have it be going so that mixes it all up and you can adjust and add more things if you want to. And I will say, I sort of had in my head at 11 o'clock last night, there's Cocoa Whip and there's lots of vegan types of whipped cream now that folding that in so you could get more of a mousse consistency. I'm like, oh, now I want to experiment with that. So
I've
Nice.
bookmarked so many avocado chocolate recipes, fudge, mousse, pudding, and I've made exactly none of them because I'm very nervous about it. So I'm super excited that you've done it successfully, and now I will go out and try it with confidence.
yeah, you can't really go wrong. I mean, especially because it's like, if it doesn't taste good yet, add more sugar. That's sort of,
Good point.
yeah. And I will say, if you don't choose to do a vegan recipe, if you want to do the traditional on the stove, it's interesting making a highly processed food from scratch because you realize exactly what's in it. And on the stove, cornstarch, milk, sugar, cocoa, it's not that complicated. And so it made me be like, I don't have to make the shaking version. So I felt that kind of the same way with the avocado ones. I can write all of these ingredients on a Post-it note. This is doable. So yeah, Katie, what did you make?
Okay, so I made blueberry maple mini cheesecake parfaits. Sounds very fancy. It may be a little bit complicated. It is not in the slightest. So what you do is you take some frozen blueberries, and I think fresh would work too, but you take some frozen blueberries, put them out on the counter to thaw. And then you're going to take almond meal, which is almonds that you put in your food processor if you want to do that yourself. It's very simple. You don't need to buy that if you've got some almonds. And then you mix the almond meal with maple syrup and melted butter. And you sort of mix that all together and tap it down in the bottom of your container. And I just used little containers like this. You just tap it down, and that's your little crust down there at the bottom. And then in a mixer, or you can use a hand mixer, you mix cream cheese, Greek yogurt, vanilla, and a little bit more maple syrup. And and that's going to be your little cheesecake mixture. And you just spoon that on top of your crust, put a layer of blueberries, another layer of your cheesecake mixture, and then another layer of blueberries, and you're all done. My little containers, I love, they have lids. So I just popped these into the fridge to use for the next day. So that was really nice. They kept really well. One of the things is this recipe that I have, it called for making 12 servings. And when I did that, they were like itty bitty. So I just kept the recipe the same, but made it into 6. And so they were still, I thought, mini, but not, a little bit more substantial than super tiny. And I also, the recipe called for 1.5 cups of blueberries. And the feedback that I got after the first time making it was that it needed more blueberries. So added another 1/2 cup to a cup of blueberries to give it that little bit more fruit to it. But these were a hit. I will make them probably again and again, especially since you can make them the day before and they can be transportable and all that. So yeah, tasty.
That sounds great. Do the blueberries, what's the consistency of the cheesecake? Like, do they sink in or do they kind of stay on top? Like, do layers stay as layers, or does it get combined?
It's almost a little bit of both, where like it gets a little maybe shady between the layers, but they do stay. So they kind of meld together, which I actually thought was really nice, and maybe a reason to let them sit a little bit before serving.
When you talked about the almond meal, do you have to stop it to keep it at powder? Like, will it turn into almond butter if you let it go too long?
Sure will, but I think you'd have to like forget about it.
Okay.
Right. So I don't think that I think there's a pretty, like, you're able to stop. There's no danger that you're going to make the nut butter unless you're really wanting to go that far.
Good to know.
And did you just eat them with a spoon?
Yes, I did.
Cool.
That sounds like a like decadent breakfast. I mean,
I would definitely eat it for breakfast. That would be good. Oh, all right, Beth, tell us what you made.
Okay, well, thank you. That really sounds good, Katie. All of them do. I'm going to get busy. So I made a frozen berry lemonade dessert that I had shared another time, and we weren't able to air it. And it was actually a recipe I got from Katie. Katie might have to tell me what book it's in. What is it in?
It's from Beautiful Smoothie Bowls, and it's a book that I actually checked out from the library, and I liked so much that I bought it.
So I didn't realize, because she made some for my birthday and shared the recipe. So it's I didn't know it was a smoothie bowl, because I put it in my freezer and then I just take it out and scoop it, and it's delicious. It's like a sorbet. So it's 3 cups. Originally it was frozen raspberries, and I couldn't find raspberries, so there was a quad berry package that I found at Kroger. It was strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries.
Yum.
And really, I've made it with cherry too. That was how I'd made it before. I believe any fruit will work. So 3 cups of the frozen berries, 1 whole lemon peeled with the bigger seeds removed, and a cup of coconut water and 2 tablespoons of agave syrup, and then process that till smooth. And you can start eating it right away, which obviously you could if it's a smoothie bowl, but put it in the freezer. And, when you want to eat it, you got to take it out for about 10 minutes just so it's scoopable. But it's so good, you guys. It's just super easy. It's so easy to make too. And so I wanted to make sure it got shared with more than just us. So, and I appreciate Katie for sharing that with me as well. So,
it's a good one. I've sent that around the world pretty much.
There's something about lemons and berries. It just like brightens up the flavor. It's so good. But you just blew my mind a little bit. Did you juice the lemon, or did you peel the lemon and then throw the whole citrus thing?
Peeled it and threw it in. And you know what? This time I put a little lemon peel in it. I was just curious what that would do. And it's adds a little to the texture. It was just a little, but so it's not. I think it was less off-putting than the raspberry seeds, which still you just bear through it because they're berries. But yeah, it was. It's a really easy one, and I enjoy having it in my back pocket for something to do. So.
And the only sweetener is agave. Is that
Mhm.
correct? Nice.
Yep.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very good. So if we don't have any other comments, thank you for watching Recipe Share. And be sure to click the link below or look at the events page on aadl.org to find the recipes we talked about today and comment with your own if you can. Join us next time when we're going to be talking about alternative burgers. We look forward to seeing you again, and we appreciate knowing what you've been making. Thanks for sharing. Thanks.
Recipe share, share a little recipe.